There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. I am your host, David Wilms, and I am joined tonight by, well, as usual, by Mike McGrady.
Hey.
That's all you got. Just hey.
Yeah, that's what I normally do, right?
Yeah, but Nephi's not even here tonight.
Yeah,
you have an opportunity to say so much more.
Is it an opportunity for me to talk?
I think this is your opportunity. You should capitalize.
Maybe the audience needs silence.
Should we have a moment of silence for Nephi?
Well, there'll be a bunch of silence because he's not here.
We love you, Nephi.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nephi's not here tonight. And do you think he'd give us a hard time if we said why he wasn't here tonight?
I don't think he would.
You don't think he'd give us a hard time?
Well, he should speak up now.
Yeah, Nephi, you want to tell us why you're not here?
I don't hear anything.
I don't hear anything either.
Okay.
So we've had this planned for a little bit, and he sends a text saying, "Guys, I'm not going to be there. My wife's at Walmart." It's like, you're going to have to go without me. My wife's at Walmart.
No, to be fair, he does have kids that are probably not of the age to leave alone.
That is true.
So
that is true.
You need to read between the lines of why his wife at Walmart has anything to do with.
No, I know. I thought it was. I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, Nephi will be missed, and we'll try and carry on without him, obviously, tonight.
Well, it's complicated.
What is?
Everything.
Yeah. Life.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Maybe if we all just got together.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. One of these days.
All right.
Yeah. So, but we soldier on without him, right? And we're hoping that he'll be able to join us on the next podcast, and we're sure he probably will.
Yeah.
And he'll have a lot of makeup time on that show, I'm sure.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we've got I'm going to call it an interesting show, a fun show, an educational show. We've got a guest joining us tonight, Erik Petersen. Introduce yourself.
This is Erik. Hey, guys.
Hey. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, good to be here.
So Erik's a listener and also an attorney that practices in the natural resource realm.
Yeah,
right?
that's fair.
So,
that's fair to say.
And how long have you been practicing in the natural resource realm?
I thought you were going to ask how long he's been listening. From the beginning.
From the beginning.
Episode 1, right?
All right, yeah. No.
I kind of feel like my natural resource passion has been with me all my life, but as a lawyer, it's been about 15 years, 15 good ones.
So,
how many bad ones?
Yeah.
We don't talk about those.
Oh, okay.
We'll leave those.
Yeah. Is the year you're in right now a good year or a bad year?
Oh, no, I love my current job. It's a good year. It's a good year. There might be some bumpy days in there, but it's a good year.
No, that's good. I'm very glad to hear that. So take us a little bit through, just really briefly, or frankly, take however long you want. We don't care. Take us through your career path.
Sure. Well, I guess there's a lot of places to start with that, but like most failed history majors, I went to law school.
Were you a failed history major, or were you a failed trolley driver?
Oh, I was a good trolley driver.
Oh, okay.
Where'd you drive a trolley?
Boston. In fact, I drove a trolley through Boston during the Big Dig when they were kind of burying I-93 through the middle of the city, so it was kind of a mess.
So you're dating yourself by saying that.
Yeah, I am.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'm older than both you guys.
Not by all that much. Well, I mean, it's by a long, long ways for me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's
Significantly
not
older.
much older than me,
You can
but
take-
you.
You can take that either way.
Significantly older than I am. Yeah. And I will respect my elders on this conversation.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, probably not. But anyway, so you were in Boston. You were a trolley driver in Boston.
Well, yeah. So I went to Boston for school and got my history degree, which I loved, and thought I'd be a history teacher my whole life. And that illusion quickly disappeared.
Did you, when you got a history degree, did you focus in any particular area of history, just out of curiosity?
I did Germany in the 1930s. So
Nothing happened there.
No, yeah, it was a pretty quiet time.
Yeah. How did you narrow your focus? Germany in the 1930s is a pretty broad subject.
He liked Mein Kampf.
That's an awful book. It's really difficult to read. I think like a lot of history buffs, I was shaped by my teachers. And you find a good teacher, and that teacher's in that area, and you just sort of pursue it. So,
What was the most interesting thing you learned in history about Germany in the 1930s? That maybe, the obvious aside. Right?
Yeah.
The obvious that everybody knows about.
For me, as a child of the early days of the History Channel, when it was all German history all the time, it seemed like it was some sort of preordained event that was going to happen, and the German people were always going to follow it. And probably the most interesting thing that I learned in going through a lot of the source materials was, nowadays you look back on it, but and understand it, but that they were just normal people who were put in a tough time period, and it kind of went real bad, just to say the least.
Yeah, that's.
But I think that sort of notion that you can get from some of the stuff on TV is that it was this sort of hive mind type of process, but it was a lot of individual people with a lot of individual circumstances that obviously ended up pretty tragically.
Huh.
Mistakes were made.
Many mistakes were made.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was interesting. But then I finished up college, and I can remember talking to my my advisor, and he basically told me, there's going to be no jobs for you, so you got to think of something else to do. So I came up with this brilliant idea of driving trolleys after graduating college.
Yeah,
So
the green trolleys that take you around the town and explain the history.
Ding ding.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I gotta interject with something here. So you said graduating college, and my mom would kill me if I didn't point out that, because she always corrects me on that. Says it's graduating from college. You're not handing the diploma to college. Yeah, you don't graduate college. Graduate from college.
But I thought, what happened to respect for your elders?
That was
He was
that
jumping
so
over you.
Yeah, that
to
was
his
so
mom.
5 minutes ago.
Well,
I'm respecting my mother.
Yeah, you took my line.
Yeah, no, Mike teed it up.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway, so you graduated from college.
Well, I
became a trolley-
matriculated.
Yeah. Okay. then you found yourself driving trolley.
Yeah, I like Mike said, I was driving a big green and orange trolley around Boston with 42 people that were sort of my captive audience, that I could tell them about all the history of that cool town, and did that for about a year and a half, at which point it became kind of insanely tedious.
A little repetitive. History repeats itself.
Yeah.
At 9
Yeah,
and 3.
every day. Yeah, when you're driving around in January in Boston with 3 people in your trolley, and you're telling them the same thing you've told people for a year and a half.
I walked that. I walked the
Freedom
Trail in January because we were there to see. I think it was Orlando Magic play the Boston Celtics, and that was the coldest I've ever been in my life. And I would love to have been on a trolley, but for some reason we just walked it. Well, we walked coffee shop to coffee shop.
Warming hut to warming hut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's about
There
as
you
far as we could go. But we walked that dang trail.
Oh man, with that polar vortex, I bet there's a lot of that going on right now. A lot of full coffee shops.
Yeah.
It's bitter cold, and they get a lot of wind there, like we do here in Wyoming, and it can cut through you.
Oh yeah.
So you decided after a year and a half you need to do something different.
Yeah, I need to do something different. I did a little substitute teaching, and I don't know what it was, but for all my life, everyone that I encountered said, "Well, I assume you're going to be a lawyer." I don't know where that came from, but at some point I was like, "Well, maybe I'll give that a shot." So I went out and got a job in a law firm and applied to schools and jumped into it. And going through school, I was always focused either on doing courtroom work or doing stuff related to natural resources in the outdoors, and sort of flowed from there. Fortunately, it all worked out for me.
Yeah. So where'd you end? So I know where you ended up. I know you're at the Department of Justice.
Yep. So first,
were you someplace first, or is that where you? I mean, most people, correct me if I'm wrong. Most people that wind up at the Department of Justice start someplace else and then wind up there, unless they go through. There's an honors program for new graduates of law schools for select folks from around the country to kind of get in at the ground level, in different parts of justice, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a very, very small amount of people come in straight out of law school and through the honors program. Very competitive.
Did you do that?
Oh no, I didn't even try.
I tried.
Did you? Good for you.
I got an interview. I was flown out to D.C. And I interviewed for the Natural Resources Division, and I think they hired 5 for that division.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Something like, or maybe it was 12.
Yeah, well, it's gotten smaller in recent years, so
I can't remember this. It might have been whatever the number was. I was the next number that didn't get picked. And
what could have been?
And I got a call. I got a call from the deputy of the Natural Resources Division, so the deputy attorney general, right? Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
They have
a different title,
yeah,
but
deputy assistant attorney general. Yeah, that's fine.
Anyway, he overseeing that division. He calls me up and he says, "I just want to apologize." And he was a Wyoming guy, and obviously I'm a Wyoming guy. He was a Wyoming guy. He said,
"No, I know who you're talking
about. You know
about.
who I'm talking about, right?" He said, "I just want to apologize." He had this track record of always wanting to hire somebody from Wyoming for the honors program, at least one person, because there was, I'm just going to say it, there's a gigantic East Coast bias for that program. East Coast schools, there's a huge bias for some of those schools, and some of the schools you might expect there to be a bias trending toward. Some of them are in the Boston area, and in Connecticut, and places like that. But anyway, he had left the country during that time. So when I did the interview, he wasn't part of the interview. He had directed his folks to make an offer to somebody from Wyoming, and I was the only one from Wyoming interviewed. So that's how it was supposed to play out. And he called me and said, "I'm sorry, something happened here, and that offer didn't come through. If somebody turns the job down, it's yours." And of course, nobody turns those jobs down.
Yeah, cold comfort. I'm sure his words meant a lot to you as you.
Yeah, as I'm like, well, now I need a plan B. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life.
Well, when I was there working on wildlife issues, there were about, I think, 18 attorneys who worked on wildlife issues, and 3 of them were from Wyoming. And all of them came through the honor grad program. There's a disproportionate number of Wyoming folks working on wildlife issues in DC.
And they probably all came through in the same time period. I know a couple of them that were the same vintage. I'm guessing there was one person that was responsible for a lot of that.
I know at least one.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, you do. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah. There was a particular period in time during the Bush administration where there was a particular person in place that was making that happen.
and they're all still there, and they're all doing a great job.
Doing a great job. Yeah,
exactly.
They're great attorneys. So you just teed up a little bit. I mean, so you kind of hinted there. So you were at DOJ.
Well, yeah. So I got out of law school, and I always thought that I'd get right into wildlife stuff, and like what happens to some folks when they come out with student loans and whatnot, and or maybe meet a young lady and thinking about a family and that kind of thing. I got lured by the dollars of big law firm life. So I did that for 5 years out of law school, working at a Texas oil and gas law firm in D.C. and doing a lot of natural resource stuff. It was a great experience, learned a lot.
Working mainly on the industry side?
All industry side, yeah. Yep. Working on transactions and helping people do business.
Yeah.
It was great and really a good learning experience. And then after that, went to the Department of Justice, working in the wildlife section, so doing litigation involving all the things that you guys talk about on this podcast: land use, wildlife, endangered species.
So real quickly, folks hear about Department of Justice, and it's been in the news lately. Just give a snapshot on where the wildlife section fits within Department of Justice broadly?
Yeah, I mean, the Department of Justice is a giant place, and I think most folks around the country understand that. I mean, it's high profile, and there's just loads and loads of attorneys, and they're on all sorts of issues, antitrust, all sorts of obscure areas of law that I know nothing about. But within that sort of larger world, there's a division that covers environment and natural resource issues. And then broken down inside of that is a much smaller group that deals with wildlife issues. And like I said, it's about 18 attorneys, most of them in D.C., some in Denver. And they handle all of the cases in court, in federal court, that involve land use, species, and those types of issues.
So the other component of the Environmental Natural Resource Division would be prosecuting environmental crimes.
That's a good example, yeah. So you could have folks that are prosecuting crimes, folks that are defending for Clean Water Act issues.
I was going to ask
Clean Air Act issues.
Yeah.
They're all different.
Hazardous waste. There's a lot of tribal work done.
And
Right.
one thing that I think is worth pointing out too, there's within justice. So you have, correct me, I may have this wrong, so you may have to correct me. But I describe the difference between solicitors and then your attorneys like you were with justice,
Sure.
right? Because you have solicitors for the most. You can have solicitors that are assigned to agencies, but they're still they still report to the Solicitor General, correct? Which is still part of Department of Justice.
Yeah, it can get a little complicated, but the general rule is that the various federal agencies have their own attorneys. So the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of the Interior, including Fish and Wildlife, they have their attorneys, and they're typically called solicitors, and they report within their agency. Where the Department of Justice gets involved is when there is a lawsuit filed involving those agencies, and the attorneys that work inside those agencies don't handle the in-courtroom work. That goes up to the folks at DOJ who are specialized in that type of work.
Which is different than what you were talking about earlier. So the solicitors are the agency representation, so the things that were within the agency, and as soon as it hits the courtroom, that's when the Department of Justice comes in. They report to a solicitor of the United States Department of the Interior, the solicitors within the agency.
Right.
Separately, there is a United States solicitor,
Who is
the Solicitor General for the United States.
But who is the third or fourth ranking member in Department of Justice?
In the Department of Justice, right. So that's the individual that gets Senate confirmation and is in charge of all of the United States practice in front of the United States Supreme Court.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So they're like a chief litigator for the United States.
Right. And
Whereas
they have attorneys assigned to they have a team of attorneys
Right.
that work for them.
But so that's the Solicitor General for the United
Right.
States.
And then
Whereas
you have
there's a
solicitors.
solicitor for an agency.
Right.
So
it's a delineation.
it is
Separation.
very
And
very
so-
similar titles.
So
but different.
the only reason I want to talk about it is that there are a number of attorneys that might be working on wildlife law, that might be wildlife attorneys, but they're not going to be the ones that you're going to hear about, working on, some of these cases like grizzly bears and wolves once they're in front of a district court judge or once it's appealed to a Ninth Circuit court or some other federal circuit court. Those are going to be not those agency solicitors. They're going to be these DOJ wildlife attorneys, and you were in that role of you were a litigator.
But
Yeah.
they were involved.
Yeah, and
Right, you have to
Yeah.
work with the wildlife attorneys
Yeah, and
and
I-
the
explain
agencies.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please
well,
do.
I thought the way that you said it was, you don't hear about them, the agency folks, the agency lawyers. And to Mike's point, they're all there. They're all working behind the scenes, but it's usually the DOJ lawyer who's quoted in the newspaper, who's sort of the front face of the effort when it comes into court. But those agency lawyers, be it at Fish and Wildlife or whatever, are working very hard to support the DOJ attorney because, frankly, they're more experienced with the subject matter. They know the stuff better from a substance standpoint. But the DOJ attorney is trusted to be the one to be able to go in court.
Yeah, so it's fair to say that the solicitors are the ones that are advising let's just give an example. BLM is doing a resource management plan amendment that's determining whatever natural resource issues are going on the landscape. The solicitor is advising the agency staff what's going on. So they're there for the nuts and bolts decision-making time. When that gets challenged in court, the Department of Justice attorney comes in, and naturally that attorney is going to seek the advice of the solicitor
Yep.
who worked on it from day one, that built it from the notice of intent all the way through the record of decision.
Yeah, and if
at the end.
that Department of Justice attorney isn't doing that, then they're not doing their job right.
Yeah.
You got to be going to that agency attorney because it all is springing from there, and they know the folks at the agency who are getting the real work done.
Right.
So, 18 wildlife attorneys in an. I mean, do you have any sense of how big justice is? I mean,
I can give you an idea of how many environment and natural resource attorneys there are, because it usually is somewhere between 400 and 500. I think that the Department of Justice is thousands of attorneys.
right.
So there's tons of people. When you say that there's 18 wildlife attorneys, and you think about it, I guess it depends on your perspective. But to me, it seems like a very small number of people to handle the vast array of issues that are out there. Although when I met my father-in-law for the first time, he was astounded that there was a single person working for the federal government on wildlife attorney issues. He was kind of outraged.
Seemed like that was a waste of money.
That's correct. Yeah,
Federal tax dollars just being flushed away.
flushed down the toilet. Yeah, he was a bit incredulous, and that was our first interaction.
So you mentioned that. Okay, so 18 attorneys handling that many issues. Give the audience a perspective on the breadth of issues and how many cases that's involved and why that's maybe a lot for 18 people.
Sure. I mean, in one way, you can encapsulate the issues that let's say 18 attorneys are focused on, which is basically, as I used to say when I would meet somebody at a cocktail hour, for instance, I would say, well, they're handling any case in federal court that involves an animal or a sea creature. Is the way I described it.
Yeah.
But what that means is, of course, the bulk of it is going to come from the Endangered Species Act, given the wide reach of that law. But there are all sorts of squirrely laws that involve wildlife, like you guys have talked about on prior podcasts with the Wild Horse and Burro Act, or you have marine mammal protection, bald and golden eagle.
Did you Lacey Act stuff too through that, or
I
is
never
that,
did.
Yeah, would that have run through wildlife attorneys? The
So,
Lacey Actors.
It gets a
Because
little.
you're mixing over with potential criminal. Right?
Yeah, so that's a little inside baseball stuff. It used to be part of the group that I worked with that did it, and then at some point they shifted it over to the criminal folks, and they have it now.
And for clarity on Lacey Act.
Yeah. So, and we've talked about this in a couple of different podcasts, but Lacey Act was passed in the early 1900s, and it was a way for the federal government to really try and prevent or limit the amount of movement of animal parts, both interstate and internationally, and really being able to address wildlife trade.
Yeah. And the reason there, of course, being that the importation is going to encourage people to take an animal that they shouldn't necessarily be taking.
So you mentioned that that's not really the wildlife attorneys in the Department of Justice handling that, and that went to criminal. Now, would that be at the U.S. attorney level?
No, this would still be at DOJ, the main folks at
You just
in DC.
threw another wrinkle in, Mike.
Did.
Yeah, we've got
on
the United
purpose.
States attorneys.
Yeah.
Just to clarify for the audience that there
Sure.
are local United States attorneys within the various districts that handle a lot of things, but they're part of the Department of Justice, but they're more on the ground where you're located as opposed to mostly housed in DC.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, there I forget the exact number, but let's just say roughly 100 United States attorneys' offices around the country, and they provide critical on-the-ground local services. They don't tend to do as many of the cases that are sort of in that specialized arena where DOJ already has folks to do it, like wildlife. They certainly do. Some of them are very good at it because they have a particular passion. But in general, the big subject matter stuff goes to DC, and the folks locally handle local issues.
Yeah.
So can we talk war stories a little bit?
Yeah, let's do that.
So how long were you at DOJ?
I was there for about 6 years.
Okay.
And yeah, there were, when you're a lawyer who gets the opportunity to be in a courtroom, which a lot of attorneys don't, you do tend to get some.
Are you saying it's not like Boston Legal
Yeah,
or
it's not.
any of the other
very much not.
shows?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
LA law, that's taking
LA
it
law.
back
So-
a little bit, right?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, and I think that's a trap that even folks who are in the legal community can fall into. Certainly law students, when you think I'm going to be a lawyer, so that means X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it definitely doesn't mean you're going to be in the courtroom. The vast majority of lawyers don't do that. But when you do get in there, you do get some interesting stories. You bump into some characters, both on the bench and on the other side.
Yeah. So before we dive into some of those stories, because I kind of want to hear some of the cases you worked on. I'm sure listeners want to hear some of the cases you worked on. But I want to circle back just briefly to, you mentioned, so 18 attorneys taken on and the type of work that you'd take on. But I thought it would be worth mentioning, just as an example, there are a number of environmental groups out there that will petition to list species, and you talked about the Endangered Species Act, but just to provide some context to what that really means, right, about type of cases. You could get, in some years, there could be 200-300 petitions to list, right? And then as the time runs out on the service for taking the required action under the statute, and they've violated the statute mainly because they just don't have the resources to deal with it, but you have a specific time frame in the statute to make a determination that they don't do, then these procedural lawsuits flow. And there could be a whole host of procedural lawsuits. There could be a host of challenging decisions to list or not list. And so just under the Endangered Species Act alone, you could theoretically have dozens of cases going at any one time.
Sure. Yeah. You did a good job of explaining that, Dave. There's a wide variety of cases, and they typically get doled out based on experience level. So if you are brand new to the Department of Justice, you're probably going to get a lot of those procedural cases where there are a lot of instances where you pretty much have very little defense as the United States to say anything other than, well, we missed our deadline. But those deadlines exist, and a lot of it is, like you said, it's not a matter of desire or effort. It's just a matter of resources. But yeah, so you could, typically what we're talking about when you're a Department of Justice attorney, like I was, is you're doing defense work. You're trying to say, we, the United States, did a good job.
Yeah.
And that could be, like you said, missing a deadline, but it could also be, well, you were supposed to act and you didn't, or you did act and you didn't do a good enough job. And those types of things.
Yeah, so you're defending action or inaction.
That's correct.
Yeah. And that's what else? You're defending action or inaction. That's really most of the world of wildlife law in
It really
DOJ,
is.
right?
It really is. And one of the interesting dynamics that I experienced there is that oftentimes what you'll find is you'll be in a lawsuit and you're essentially getting attacked from both sides. You're being attacked by the environmentalists, let's say, for example, that you didn't do the rule that you promulgated was not protective of species, and then you're getting attacked by industry on the other side, saying you're being too heavy-handed.
Well, both Mike and I have been in the position of either attacking or defending.
Sometimes
the
at the
federal
same
agency,
time.
and sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and we were just one party, right? So,
Right.
And some of these cases have a lot of parties.
Yeah, they do, and a lot of parties means a lot of attorneys, and that makes it oftentimes complicated and sometimes frustrating. But I think that as a Department of Justice attorney, what you try to think of, sometimes it's true, sometimes it might be less true, but you try to think of, I'm the reasonable one in the room. I'm being attacked on all sides, and my job is to tell the court I'm the reasonable one. And frankly, because I'm being attacked on all sides, don't I seem like the reasonable one? Which is often a useful tool.
Yeah, I've seen that used.
Yeah.
So let's talk war stories. Give us a couple examples of cases that in the wildlife world that you worked on during your time at Justice.
Yeah, there's a couple useful examples. The way I think of the wildlife world is that it can be so small, the issue that you're fighting over, or it can be gigantic. And that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the case is interesting or not, or important or not, based on the size. But in my time there, we worked on cases that were as big as a court was considering shutting down, a 17-nation naval exercise in the Pacific that takes 2 years to organize.
For what reason?
Well, in that
sonar.
Sonar.
Okay.
Because
that's what I'm getting at.
amongst other things, the sonar.
So Marine Mammal Protection Act issues.
Sure, you can drive whales unintentionally, and they can end up beached. But on the other hand, we need to be able to prepare our defenses. So how do you?
Actually, I'm kind of interested. We'll get into other stuff, and we don't talk a lot about the marine issues, but this is kind of fascinating, right? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure.
Just the science. Obviously, you had to learn some of the science to deal with this case, right? And provide some factual context. This sounds kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it gets a little wonky, but I'll keep it kind of high level.
We'll break it down.
I mean, it's all about frequency. And so, I don't know, I think of Hunt for Red October or something. You think about this sonar being used, and there's high-frequency sonar and low-frequency sonar, and they both serve different purposes. And depending on the range of the sonar, it can be particularly irritating to a marine mammal like a whale, dolphin, that kind of thing.
Yeah, those mammals that use sonar
themselves. Yeah, and you can understand how it can scramble things a bit.
Sure.
And so the debate there being from the environmental groups who were suing the Navy, saying, well, you haven't looked at this close enough, you haven't looked at it hard enough. It's the types of things that you see in most of these cases. It's the question of how good of a job did you do before you made the decision to do it? Obviously, when you bring in the military, it brings a whole nother level of analysis. The military gets a lot of breaks from environmental laws for obvious reasons, but they're still held to a certain standard. And in these cases, the judge, from time to time, the litigation spanned a number of years, but the judge did shut down naval exercises and said, you have to stop doing this.
And we're talking naval exercises that were being planned and prepared for purposes of national security. Right?
Multiple aircraft carriers, dozens and dozens of warships just from the United States alone. But then also you have all of these other countries like Taiwan and the Netherlands and Britain that have all steamed their ships around the world to be there to practice.
Sorry. And NEPA is going to stop this.
Yeah, was it NEPA and the Marine Mammal Protection Act?
Yeah, correct.
I would assume that had to be the underlying or the overlying statute would had to be that Marine Mammal Protection Act, and that for some of these, and maybe ESA even too.
Yeah, you can get in there. I can't remember if we had ESA claims, but with any well-coordinated environmental effort on this type of scale, what they're going to go at is at a minimum one that you made some procedural failings. You didn't dot your I's and cross your T's.
Yeah, you only turned over 999 of the 1,000 rocks.
Correct. Yeah. And that one rock was really important
That was the critical rock.
Right, and you see that over and over again. Yeah. And then the other would be, well, no, what you are doing directly violates the law, and that would be the other way to attack it. In those cases, the environmentalists achieved short-term success, but in the long term, the real world practicalities went out, which is we have to have these things.
So basically, the court said, you need to look at this a little bit harder, and Navy went back and looked at it a little harder, completed whatever analysis was directed by the court, and then they were able to proceed with their.
Yeah, essentially.
Basically.
And then, as you know, in these cases, then you get sued again.
Right, of course.
And then the groups challenging say, well, that's fine, but we figured out a couple other things you didn't do right.
And now we need an injunction to prevent you from having these drills until you figure out these. Turns out there were 1,002 rocks.
Right, precisely. Yeah. And around and around you go.
I mean, I think that's a good way to look at some of these cases that we deal with is. Especially on the procedural side, I really like to look at it in the term of rocks. You were supposed to look at you only looked at 50 of the 60 rocks, or you only looked at 999 of the 1,000, and then you look at those 1,000, and then the next lawsuit is, we found 2 more.
Yep.
And then another lawsuit says, we found 3 more.
Is that you didn't look at the 6 rocks that a judge, 20 states over threw into the stream.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what that really highlights, as a DOJ attorney, you can feel like you're getting everything stacked against you because it's hard to win these cases when there's innumerable rocks. But what's really difficult is for the agencies themselves, who are really trying to get something done on the ground. And it's got to be immensely frustrating for them.
Yeah, maybe a better analogy instead of rocks is it's like clamming, right? Right? Digging for clams. Like, you have no idea where they are. You can, I mean, you do. There's a process to it, but you could miss one, right? Despite your best efforts, you might miss one. Very unintentionally. Didn't even know it was there until somebody said after the fact, "Hey, you missed that clam."
That's right. It's all Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yeah.
It's a lot of second guessing.
Yeah.
Which is a very tough standard to meet for these folks who are trying to get stuff done.
So that's a case you handled on a gigantic scale.
Right. So then if we get down to like a super small level scale, I would think of wild horses.
Which is funny because a lot of people around the West would not identify wild horses as a small scale.
Well, the wild horse issue writ large is a massive problem.
Right.
It's a huge failure as a program. But as a DOJ attorney, I might have an individual case where the Bureau of Land Management was trying to gather up 150 horses, and they're getting sued, and then you have to defend them on that. So on the one hand, you've got aircraft carriers, and on the other hand, you have 150 horses. It's pretty wide range.
So what about that? Can we talk about wild horses? Kind of your experience with it?
Have you always had to litigate wild horses? Or are there other species involved in this?
Well, I think I've worked on so many interesting species with all sorts of interesting and wacky biological stories. But we can definitely, I love talking about wild horses. I mean, it's frustrating to no end, but it was almost one of the first cases that I got when I left my law firm and joined the Department of Justice was, hey, here's this new guy. Let's give him wild horses. And then wild horse litigation has been.
It's almost like hazing.
Yeah, it is a little bit. And I felt like at the end of it that I told Mike one of the first times I met him when he had a wild horse case, I said, well, I've probably done more wild horse cases than anybody in the country. So if you need any help, let me know. And then I think I might have said at the time, I hope I did, which was, well, it's kind of a dubious distinction. Yeah. It's a weird area of law to have accidentally found an expertise.
I remember my reaction. Why aren't you writing this brief?
Right, yeah. I've got a project for you.
And it seems to me, I mean, one thing you didn't say there is that you won a lot of wild horse cases.
It was about 50-50.
That's actually better than I thought it would be. I mean,
It's a tough statute.
It's a really tough statute, and to the federal government's credit, and I don't say that sentence very often, but to the federal government's credit, to BLM's credit, they've been trying for a long time to figure out creative ways to address this wild horse problem on public land, on federal public lands, right? Sterilizations, roundups. Can you lethally remove them? I mean, they've been trying all kinds of options, and they get sued on every last attempt.
Yeah, and
to do something to address these kind of exploding horse populations around the West.
Yeah, you're right, and it really brings it home, at least for me, being able to work with the folks who are doing this on the ground. I mean, literally the guys who are out there wrangling horses, flying helicopters, and they're just working their tails off in any way that they can to try to help stem the bleeding, frankly, in this problem. And I could see their frustration when they do their best, and then every single time they get dragged into court. It's very tough.
And it's when you watch how those court cases start, in these western states that have horse populations, it seems to me that you have the federal agencies want to be able to address it. The sportsmen's groups want to be able to address it. The conservation groups want to be able to address it. Most of the environmental groups want to be able to address it because it's viewed as a significant harm on native wildlife and native, flora and fauna. Yet you have folks largely outside of the West, not always outside the West, but a lot of their funders certainly come from out of the West, that are pushing these different ideologies and romanticizing this horse, and they're driving this litigation really, and I don't even know if they realize it, at the expense of the native flora and fauna, and the expense of the people that are living on the ground and trying to manage this landscape on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, you raised a lot of issues there, and they're all correct. In my experience, the wild horse issue is driven by a very small but extraordinarily passionate group of people who just believe so strongly in this one issue that they get a bit of tunnel vision, and they don't see the bigger picture like a lot of the groups that you mentioned do, including the federal government, the state government, just about everybody.
It's a place where you can get, for example, the agriculture industry and the environmental community around the table and have them agree on an issue,
right,
and agree on a way to address the issue.
Yep.
And you still can't implement it.
And you still can't get it done because, and I only talked about half the issue. One half of it is having those folks that are extremely passionate. One of the main plaintiffs in wild horse litigation that I dealt with, she estimated that she put about 500,000 miles a year on her truck driving around to see wild horses. There's not a lot of people that are willing to do that. The other side of it,
I kind of want to know what kind of truck she has. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It holds up.
I hear you.
And right now, all I have in my head, total side tangent. Remember the Simpsons episode, Can You Narrow?
I believe that's the one where the truck actually rears up like a wild horse.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And it's like, gas mileage. It's one highway, 0 city. Sorry, total side. Well, but that's what made me think of it, because of this Western commercial rearing up like a horse. We're talking about wild horses.
It's pretty good. Well, and then the other thing is money.
So people have blinders on.
People have blinders up, and then there's the money. In some of my early wild horse cases, literally as I was walking out the building, people were like, "I heard Sheryl Crow's going to be there." Viggo Mortensen supposedly, and there are certain people that are just super fired up, and they've got a lot of disposable income, and they're willing to give it to these folks who are out there, pounding the dirt, running around chasing horses.
So you're saying litigation may be a fundraising opportunity?
That's been known to happen.
Okay. Just thought I'd throw that out there for the average listener.
And fundraising.
Yeah.
No, I think that's right, and I think it can be an effective way to motivate folks, especially if you can point to a win, even if it's temporary, and say, "Look what we did. We accomplished something." One can question what that really means, but it can be a very effective way to get money coming in. The wild horse people have done that very effectively.
So wild horses, naval strategery. What else?
Of course, out west, all of our charismatic megafauna, as we like to say.
Yeah.
I worked on the litigation for the 2007 grizzly bear delisting. I think most of your listeners will know that was the second to last time that we tried to get it done.
Well, when we say, just so we're clear, 2007 grizzly bear delisting, we're talking about the grizzly bear population in the greater Yellowstone area, that Montana, Wyoming, Idaho population.
Correct. Exactly.
That now is in its it went through a second delisting rule as a result of that litigation that you failed on. And now,
well, did he?
Well, he got a partial win. Does it count as a partial win?
So, why did he go to the? Well, anyways, tell your story.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump ahead.
Well, so in 2007, the Fish and Wildlife Service issued a rule that was going to take the greater Yellowstone population of grizzly bears off the list. Unsurprisingly, it was challenged by just about every environmental group under the sun. And they eventually convinced the judge in Montana that there were certain failings. I think what's most interesting about that is that even back in 2007, the court, both the district court and eventually the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, recognized that the grizzly bear population in the greater Yellowstone area is recovered. which is just an easy way of saying that the Endangered Species Act did its job and the species is ready to come off the list and return to state management. Unfortunately, in 2007, for the Fish and Wildlife Service and my clients, the judge found certain failings, despite the fact that the species was recovered, that the rule wasn't quite good enough.
I mean, basically saying the species is recovered, but you can't ensure that it will stay recovered.
That's right.
Or the species recovered, but your paperwork is not right.
And that's also correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Those are two different ways of saying, kind of identifying the same thing that the problem the court identified. Which, of course, is very frustrating because from a practical standpoint, you think, look, if it's recovered, who cares? If the homework's perfect, the problem's solved.
Now, do you remember? So the district court in that case identified several deficiencies
That's right.
in the rule, right, in the delisting rule.
Yeah. Judge Malloy up in Montana found 3 or 4, I can't remember exactly, but failings in the rule. That was then appealed up to the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit really only agreed with one of the reasons. And
that reason was it was related to a decline in whitebark pine.
Right, which is one of the grizzly bear's main food sources.
Well, so that was a debated.
Yeah, sure.
It's. I mean, let's clarify that a little bit because I think it's understood that at that time that was a principal food source at a particular time of year for a certain subset of the overall population of grizzly bears in the greater Yellowstone area. So
those that live and want to be around 10,000 feet at a particular time when the cones have the high protein value.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
I think that's better than saying that was a primary food source for grizzly bears in the Yellowstone area.
I think Erik's oversimplification was believed or at least noted by the courts.
That's right. In 2000, in the litigation following the 2007 rule, that's how the courts portrayed it. Certainly now, the time has passed. We've looked back, and what the Fish and Wildlife Service had said back then has borne out to be true, which is that bears are omnivores and they're highly adaptable in what they eat.
Right, and there was a food synthesis report that was compiled by a number of researchers, state, federal agencies, others, after that decision to kind of identify what they do eat and if their habits had changed and if their body conditions were changing as a result of a decline in whitebark pine, and that research came back and said no. So at that time it seemed pretty simple. Okay, we had one deficiency in the rule. We now have the science to suggest that deficiency, we can now address that deficiency. And so now all we really need to do is publish a new rule addressing that deficiency, and bada bing, bada boom.
There were judges 20 states away that threw 6 different rocks in a stream.
Well, I was going to say that this comes back to the rocks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we thought we had it down to here's the thing the one thing that we need to address. Yeah. We addressed it in about 18 months. We should have had a new rule. That new rule took 7-8 years and addressed a whole host of other things as a result of other litigation in other jurisdictions, in addition to just frankly other demands from folks to have addressed in a rule that wasn't addressed in the 2007 rule. In the meantime, that population had continued to increase.
Doubly recovered.
Yeah, so it continues to be recovered, and we continue to be, we had a new delisting rule in 2017, and that was challenged, and a district court found, surprise, surprise, found that there were a few more rocks that need to be turned over, and now that's on appeal, and it's kind of back into this the perception of some, this kind of never-ending cycle of how do you get recovered species back into state management.
Yeah, and it shows how the agencies and derivatively the Department of Justice attorneys, you're always looking at a moving target. If the court says there's one problem, it doesn't mean you can just fix that one problem necessarily and it's all right. Time moves on and more rocks get thrown in the stream.
And it trickles down because then the states think, well, there are these moving goalposts, right? Here's what we thought we had to have for recovery. We met all of that, and now we have these new cases in different jurisdictions saying, the law is applied a little bit differently now than it was, 5 years ago, and so we got to scoot that goalpost, a little bit farther.
Biology didn't change.
Yeah, and so but it creates maybe unnecessary tension between the federal government and the states. That's sometimes rightful tension. I mean, there's sometimes the tension is justified. Sometimes I think, based on my experience, the federal government takes actions that are unnecessary, that are capitulating to certain organizations out of fear of being sued. But sometimes they're responding to the realities of other litigation in other jurisdictions, and they feel like they're boxed in and have to do this. But the states are pushing back, saying, "Well, why? Why? It shouldn't be that way. We said we'd do this, we did that. That should be enough." And so puts you in an interesting position. It puts federal agencies in an interesting position, and it creates just breeds this constant cycle of distrust and continuing litigation, and it kind of feeds that fire of a group saying there are problems with these laws, we need to change them.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's natural for folks to get frustrated with that and question whether or not the laws are serving their purpose if you have a species like the grizzly bear that is biologically recovered and yet you can't get it back in state management. It's frustrating.
So
Absolutely.
Is there anything about your time working on that case that you found particularly interesting?
In the 2000...
Yeah, that 2007 case.
Coming from private practice where I had been doing, almost all the folks that I've been working with saw the world in the same way. If you're going to say, well, I want to buy 50 of your gas stations and you want to sell them, everybody kind of understands what's going on. What was eye-opening to me was to realize how in the wildlife world, particularly in court, that the parties on opposing sides just don't see the world the same way. And that was a learning experience for me and something that I see on a daily basis. Folks just have a different world outlook on issues, and you can't talk to each other oftentimes on sort of a level playing field just because everyone sees things so differently.
So that begs the question, and I know we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started, and I think this is a perfect time to bring that up. You're talking about this, people not seeing the world the same way. What about within the Department of Justice? You have 18 wildlife attorneys, and you're being tasked with doing a job, and there's going to be a perception. You read
about it
right?
in the press, and you think, the federal government they're all a bunch of Democrats because they like their pensions and or whatever, or they're whenever the administration changes, they're all a bunch of Republicans because they're making X, Y, and Z decisions. But what's your experience on the day-to-day operations and the people that show up?
I think that that's one of the things, at least my personal experience, which is, of course, all I can speak to, is what distinguishes the Department of Justice from many other federal agencies. As usual, when people talk about the type of thing, like, most of federal employees are Democrats. Well, I mean, are the majority? Maybe. I think there's some grains of truth in there, but I think what sets the Department of Justice apart is people check their personal ideologies at the door. They recognize that they're there to represent the administration that they're working for. I certainly experienced that. When I joined the Department of Justice, it was under George W. Bush. Fought as hard as I could on all of my cases there, and then when President Obama assumed office, and sometimes that meant flipping a 180 and having to take a different position, I did that to the best I could. And I think that was borne out by the people that I worked with. It came from all different viewpoints. And everybody just got their case assigned to them and did the best thing they could.
Well, let me give maybe an extreme example and see kind of an extreme hypothetical. So I want to take these 18 wildlife attorneys, and let's just assume it was not you handling the grizzly bear case, right? Let's, for this hypothetical, assume you have an attorney in there who feels very passionately about grizzly bears, and has sort of this deep-seated disdain for the thought that a grizzly bear could be hunted, for example, doesn't want to see that happen, and in their personal belief would be, they would like to see that bear protected, that population protected to prevent a hunt from ever occurring, and make sure the protections of the act apply, whether it's recovered or not, just for that tool to keep it from being hunted. And then they're asked, that attorney is assigned that case and asked to defend the delisting rule. In your experience, somebody could, and maybe that's too extreme, but your experience is that somebody with that personal conviction about something could put that aside and defend to the best of their ability with zealous representation the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's decision to delist a grizzly bear.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that there are attorneys out there who can't do that, and they're smart enough not to take that job. They'll just stay working for an environmental group, for example. But I had colleagues that had come over from very active animal protection groups, and then when they joined the Department of Justice, they check that at the door, and they do what they think is best for the United States. It's pretty impressive, actually. I think you're right in some of your tone to be skeptical of it. I think most people are right to be skeptical of it. But when you see it in action, I mean, it's right there. People know what they're there to do, and there's no shenanigans. Is there are there folks somewhere in the federal government who might be acting in a way that's not 100% consistent with the administration's goals? I'm sure. But I didn't see that at the Department of Justice. People took their integrity as a lawyer representing their client to be, virtually sacrosanct, very serious.
Well, at the end of the day, we do have an ethical obligation to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're really not. Yeah, exactly. You're not doing your job, and you're not being the lawyer that you signed up to be if you can't do that.
Well, what is it? I should probably know my rules of professional responsibility a lot better than I do, but it's somewhere right around Rule 1 of zealous advocacy on behalf of your client, right?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the Hippocratic Oath if you're a doctor, right? I mean, it's like one of the first things is, you've got to represent the client to the best of your ability. Yeah. And did I have? I mean, certainly, like over lunch, have a conversation with somebody saying, I'm representing this agency. They did this. They really screwed it up. Not even from a personal policy preference, but just
it's a legal mess.
They did a bad job, but I'm still going to fight for them because you have to.
Yeah.
I think that's the way that the whole system is structured.
Oh, I mean that's reassuring to hear, and I trust you, so I want to believe that's true.
Well, if I can get you to want to believe that, that's
pretty good. I want to believe that that's true.
Wow. Like I said, the Department of Justice has thousands of attorneys, and I can only speak for the ones that I worked with. But I can tell you without hesitation that everybody just took their job and the representation of whatever's put on their plate.
So basically, the blame.
Here we go.
If we're looking for somebody to blame, it has to go back to the original agency that made the decision to begin with. Because at Justice, you're wearing your white hat, and
I always used to say that at Justice I felt like I was wearing a gray hat, and what I meant by that is that sometimes you might feel like you're wearing a white hat, and sometimes you might feel like you're not, but you're always you're never wearing the black hat. I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, the world is a little gray from time to time, and I think that is true. But I have to say that I've had a number of legal jobs, and that one, along with my current job, is one where I know that I walk out the door at the end of the day, and I'm proud of what I've done, and even if I don't agree with the policy decisions that I'm defending, because that's not my job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I got to ask, because there are going to be listeners that want to know, just briefly, because I think you mentioned these charismatic megafauna, but we've only talked about the one, and I think you said offline that you defended the one of the DOJ, or not the DOJ, excuse me, one of the Fish and Wildlife Service rules on wolves. Mm-hmm. Which one was that?
So I worked around the same time as the grizzly delisting on the northern Rocky Mountain gray wolf 10J population. And for folks listening, that's the experimental population that was reintroduced, and worked to defend a lot of things associated with it.
And you're talking, so the experimental population was reintroduced in Yellowstone and in central Idaho, and it included Montana and parts of eastern Oregon and Washington.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so you handled some of that. So from the Wyoming side, we would have disdained you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think back to those cases, and I can look back now with my mind's eye and see some folks from Wyoming that I work with now who were in the room who I didn't talk with at the time, but you do your best.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, I got that experience with grizzlies and wolves, which was a lot of fun early on. We already talked about the wild horses, of course, and then you have all sorts of weird little species that come along your way. One of the funny things that happens is that once you get a case with the species, you tend to have all of the future cases with that species because you're familiar.
You become
with
the
it.
expert.
Yeah, you're
Right.
you're Pika boy.
Pika boy, or for me it was the Arctic grayling.
Oh, sure. That was a pretty contentious one.
Sure, and it was. I probably had 4 or 5 different cases over the years.
Okay, yeah.
And I was also fortunate enough, not to get too far away from Wyoming, but to get
as far as you want.
To get a lot of the whale cases out in Hawaii, which was just fine by me to go out there. And
Is that mostly humpback whales?
Humpback whales and then a lot of turtles.
Oh yeah, leatherback and green
leatherback and loggerhead.
Loggerhead. Okay,
Yeah.
and then monk seal, I imagine.
Yeah, I never had a monk seal case, but that's another big issue.
Yeah.
Right there.
Either way, he had to go to Hawaii.
Yeah,
Tough duty.
Had to do it.
Yeah.
Well, it made up for all those trips to Reno for wild horse cases.
And Reno's not a bad place.
I came to like it quite a bit.
And it's surprisingly close to Lake Tahoe.
Very close. They've got it, for me at least. They've got a AAA baseball team, so I was out there in the summer. There was something to watch.
And from a climate standpoint, it's not the blistering heat that you get in a Las Vegas.
No, it's got that nice dry western heat.
Yeah. So let's. I mean, we can be realistic here. It's still not Hawaii, but
Yeah, let's not get too crazy.
yeah. But Reno's not that bad.
Yeah, and I met my wife there, so
Well,
Hey.
then it's pretty good.
Yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah. Well, good. Anything? So, is there anything else burning that, like, on your mind as you're thinking back through your time as a DOJ attorney
Anything funny?
Yeah, something. Yeah, anything
weird?
Yeah, something weird, funny. There's got to be something out there that just sort of.
Yeah, I feel like we could have another podcast, which is funny things associated with wild horses. There's something about wild horses that just draws out either very interesting individuals or crazy circumstances.
Oh, give us something. Give us something.
Well, let's see. I had one case where there was the gallery, which is all the folks behind you, the public, all wild horse advocates in costume.
Or they wearing horse heads
Horse
and stuff.
heads, including
in the courtroom.
In the courtroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, including the 2-person kind. One's the rear, one's the front. And it made for one thing that when you go into a courtroom, and especially when you're in the elevator, you're always cognizant of is you try to think, well, wait, who am I in the elevator with here? I got to be careful that I'm not talking too openly. But when you're in an elevator going to a wild horse hearing with a bunch of people dressed up as wild horses, it's a whole nother atmosphere. There's some real interesting people. I had a case where the wild horse attorney dislocated his hip in the middle of a hearing, and the judge had to freeze the hearing, and then they kicked us all out, which again was interesting because we were all crammed into the hallway, and the wild horse people have heard me argue.
So now you get to stand with them,
breath on my face from people. That one was good. We came back in, and that attorney had a friend of his who was dressed in wild horse gear as well pop his leg back into place And he got back up and continued his argument after the dislocated hip. That was pretty good. We had one where I was working with a co-counsel. I mean, she was, like 4'10", this tiny Japanese woman, very, very smart, wonderful attorney. And we were being crushed by all these wild horse advocates. And I kind of had to, just was concerned for her safety and shuttled her off and said, let's just get away from the courtroom. And this is in Reno. And we got about 2 blocks away where I felt like she wasn't going to get hurt. And I said, okay, let's just call a cab and we'll go back to the hotel. She was a bit shaken up. And, I dialed, whatever it was for the taxi. And then, where are you? And I turned around and we were in the parking lot in the morning in front of this gigantic strip club. And I had to tell the folks, come pick us up in front of the, whatever it was, Dancing Pony or something horse related probably. But I've told Mike about my favorite moment as a lawyer was in a wild horse case where the disputed issue was that a tribe had gathered up a bunch of wild horses that were loose. And the Bureau of Land Management had said it was okay for them to do that because they weren't wild horses. They were just, for lack of a better term, range trash.
I like that almost as a better term than feral horses.
Which of course there's no true wild horses, but so they're all out there in the tribe.
So range trash is what we're going to call them from now on.
All right. Well, hey, I contributed. All right. But so the tribe had gathered them up, and the wild horse advocates had sued and said that they were actually wild and they shouldn't have been gathered up because they're entitled to protection. And they had the preeminent veterinarian in Nevada testify that he had gone and examined all of the horses, and he was convinced that they were all wild. And this was direct witness testimony. So we're trying to figure this out, and we're of course disputing that. And the judge said, well, I see in the papers there's this guy, I forget his name, but I want to hear from this guy. Well, I didn't have that witness ready, but he was about 15 minutes away. So I told the judge we could get him. I'd never met the guy. I hadn't prepped, hadn't talked to him. And he came in, and right when he came in and everyone saw he was there, the clerk called the judge, so I knew I only had about 45 seconds to talk to him before things started. He walked in, too. He was wearing blue jeans, a white T-shirt that was about 2 sizes too small for him, and he had a necklace around his neck that was like a string with a shark tooth hanging off of it, kind of constricted around his neck. It was quite a striking look. And I had to put him on the stand. But as any lawyer who has to examine a witness like that knows, the best thing you could possibly have in a witness like that is either someone who's been in law enforcement or someone who's been in the military, because they know how to answer a question, which is yes, no, or I don't know. And it's just a dream. And he was a fantastic witness. Well, while I was examining him and trying to get the questions out that the judge wanted me to ask, somebody I didn't see handed me a note and had two points on it and bullet points. It said, one, ask about geldings. So I said to him, well, how many geldings, gelded horses are in the herd? And he said, well, it's about half. I said, well, in your experience,
what's a gelded horse?
So
just for folks that
don't know. So that would be a horse that's been castrated.
Yeah, okay.
And so I said, in your experience, do you encounter wild horses in Nevada? They're gelded.
Spontaneously
gelded. And he gave this perfect. No, sir. And at that point, the attorney on the other side just put his head down on the table because he knew that the whole case had blown up. But it was too good to stop because I'd seen this note and I couldn't believe it. And I said, were there any Shetland ponies in the herd? And he said, yeah, there are 2 Shetland ponies. I said, do Shetland ponies, occur in the wild in Nevada? Is that something? Of course he says no. At that point, the judge's eyes are just in the back of his head. And,
so are you saying the veterinarian that looked at every single one of
every
those?
horse? Yeah. I think his reputation took a bit of a hit, or maybe not. Who knows? But that was sure satisfying.
Sounds like that veterinarian is who he's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, right. And he probably still has tons of business.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
Probably
exactly.
for the same clients.
But it was great. It was great. And that guy did a super bang-up job.
So you won that case.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That one went down smoothly.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. And then I think that was pretty much my last case before leaving the Department of Justice. I had already decided that I was going to move on to other things, and it was just a great sort of ending to my time there.
Well, we're both personally. Well, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for Mike. I'm glad you left DOJ, just because it brought you here, and we had an opportunity to get to know you, and become friends with you. And so I don't think that would have happened had you stayed at DOJ. So I'm glad you left DOJ, and I'm glad you brought those experiences to what I would say the good side of the fight.
Well, for the record, I am happy he left. I'm confident that if he hadn't, he'd have kicked my butt in court.
We would have ended up against each other sooner or later.
We would have at some point, and it wouldn't have worked well for me.
Instead, I got the opportunity to come out to Wyoming and get out of D.C. And those are two separate things and related things that are fantastic, getting away from D.C. and getting to Wyoming.
Yeah.
And you've been in Wyoming now 4 years. 4 years, yeah. And settling in and settled in now, and not just to the job, but to kind of this lifestyle out here.
And I love it. It's great.
Yeah. We do have to get you out. We got to get you out hunting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's gonna happen. I just want to make that crystal clear. That will happen, and then we will have you back, and you won't be talking about your experiences at DOJ. You're going to be talking about your experiences on a mountaintop, packing out your first elk.
That sounds good. I know if I go with you, Dave, that I'll come out successful.
No,
you'll be packing out my elk.
Yeah, that's not how that works. Yeah.
I'll do that too.
Yeah, you have to cut your teeth by packing out somebody else's elk first.
Sure, I can pay my dues.
Yeah, but we'll get that for you. In the meantime, so I know you do outdoor stuff, right? You enjoy the outdoors. You enjoy hiking and camping and all sorts of stuff outdoors, right? And we always end these podcasts when we have guests on. We always ask them the same question. This is the Your Mountain podcast, and we want to know from folks what's your mountain? What's that place that's so important or special or meaningful to you, that just drives you, that it's a place you got to be, that you think about it, whatever. What is that? What's that place for you?
Yeah, I thought about this, and there's certainly a lot of ways I can answer the question, but probably most meaningfully for me, and this dates back to going back to when I was a kid in the Boy Scouts, is that sound when your boots hit the trail and there's that crunch. That to me is my mountain. I know that I'm going to have a good day if I got boots on. One, that's good. I'm not in dress shoes. I like that. And when I hear that crunch, I know I'm going to go see some cool stuff and breathe some clean air.
So it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you have that crunch below your feet.
Yeah, there's better places than others, but that'll do.
Yeah.
So you must love our intro and outro.
Yeah. It's satisfying.
Yeah.
So on that, so we really appreciate you taking the time and coming in and talking about your experience with DOJ as a wildlife attorney. We've had wildlife attorneys on before, that have worked on the state side, but I mean there's folks on the state side, there's folks on the federal side, there's wildlife attorneys in the non-government world that are out there working to, protect these resources, right? These wildlife, water, land resources, and you are one of those. And so we thank you for I guess we thank you for your service to your country and your resource and doing that. But definitely thank you for being on this. And for our listeners out there, take a minute when you're done listening to this podcast, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Hit the subscribe button and give us a rating. Comment. Provide us a comment, give us feedback, send us an email with some ideas for future podcasts. If you got people you want us to talk to, you got ideas for guests, let us know. We're always looking for more content, looking for more ideas, things that you want to hear about. You can get us at our email at yourmountain@itsyourmountain.com. Find us on all social media at the handle @itsyourmountain. And remember that life is about experiences, so go have one.